In 2012, George Lucas sold his vaunted studio to the Walt Disney Company for a sum of over $4 billion. And a few years after that, inexplicably, Disney managed to crash the entire ship. How did Kathleen Kennedy manage to convince then CEO Robert Iger of the Walt Disney Company to kill Star Wars? Let's talk about that.
And remember, folks, Kathleen Kennedy has not hit the subscribe button for Valiant Renegade. Don't be like Kathleen Kennedy.
Oh, God.
Subscribe today.
Renegade Online. Well, thanks for joining us again. I hope everybody has been enjoying these discussions with WDW Pro here on Valiant Renegade. We're always trying to bring something different here to the conversation at large, trying to go a little bit deeper than average, or at least the average YouTube channel. A lot of great YouTube channels out there, but again, we like to do things a little bit differently, putting Hollywood through the lens of business and finance. So, Pro, a lot of people have been waiting to talk about this or hear us talk about this. And that is let's call it the inside history of the Disney Star Wars sequel trilogy. And boy, has a lot been made about this over the years. This is something that you have been following for quite a long time through, the various places that you have posted over the years. Again, now over at thatparkplace.com. Make sure everybody checks that out. Of course, the link will be in the description below the video. But Pro, why don't you maybe take us back to the beginning? And let's kind of take a chronological walk through this. Maybe because there's a lot of folks watching this that maybe still aren't aware of some of the things out there. And maybe some, for those who are aware, maybe don't know a lot of the details that you're about to share with us.
So where I want to go with this is I want to talk about an aspect of the sequel trilogy and how it was developed that I don't think has been discussed at length anywhere else, which seems like that would be a difficult task because the sequel trilogy has been defended and critiqued and attacked and leveled over and over and over and over again because it is so divisive and because there is some group out there that enjoys it. There is also some group out there that despises it with every part of their being. And simultaneously, I have to think about the fact that there are very young people, kids, who are going to grow up and perhaps look back fondly at the sequel trilogy. And maybe if you are hearing my voice right now, you're watching this video 15 years into the future, and you're trying to think about why did people dislike the sequel trilogy when you came up loving it so. At the time of this video, that might apply to people who loved the prequel trilogy. Absolutely. And then loved all of the properties that spawned off of it. And so I'm trying to think of all of these groups at once and present material in a new way. It seems like these conversations are resonating with viewers and with those who are listening to it as if it's a podcast. And I think specifically about one person. In fact, the first video we did together, we were talking about the objectivity of the news. And the only negative comment in the entire list was someone saying they wanted more. They wished that we could have presented the entire conversation instead of breaking it up into 40-minute chunks. So,
that'd have been a 2-hour video, folks. And YouTube... you get into sketchy territory with YouTube when you go there, especially on a channel whose usual video length is maybe, 15 minutes or 20 minutes. Occasionally we have the longer conversations like when Cameron is here or like when Pro is here when we have guests that we might go 45 minutes to an hour, but you start clocking up 2-hour videos and you royally screw up a lot of videos that come after it is the bottom line. So you have to be cautious just for everybody's edification out there.
But what that means when we're looking at these comments is that to some degree, somehow, we're aiming in the right direction. Mm-hmm. And when you look at the response to the Star Wars sequel trilogy, the comments towards that are not the same. They are very different. And so you have to think that perhaps it did not aim in the right direction, because the goal of the sequel trilogy was to appeal to the broadest base that it could. And not just appeal to the broadest base that it could, but to ingratiate as many people as possible into Star Wars, into a fandom of Star Wars, both domestically and abroad. And it failed all over the globe, except in North America, where it came out extraordinarily strong with The Force Awakens and then diminished over time. Now, I'm not interested in talking about The Empire Strikes Back and the argument that was made that that movie made less than A New Hope, and therefore, like, we don't have to get into that. That can be an entire another video where we can break down the original trilogy and why that is. Suffice to say, The Empire Strikes Back was a phenomenon, just like A New Hope. It was outstandingly successful, popular. Everybody was talking about it. Okay. With the sequel trilogy, it seems to me that every single entry became less popular and more divisive. It also seems to me that with The Last Jedi, had there not been the first week where people went thinking they were going to receive a quality entry, I think it would have been an absolute disaster financially for Disney. It had such a tremendous first weekend, and then people over time began to realize that what they saw was not up to their standards. It was not up to the quality that they had expected. And this was similar to what we saw happen with The Phantom Menace, except there was enough goodwill because it was George Lucas and maybe everybody gets a mulligan. But here it was a new guy. It's a new guy who did not have much to his name, right? Looper doesn't really get you normally what you would expect for gaining control of a major Star Wars movie. But the area that I would like to go that has not been explored very much is the merchandising side of the sequel trilogy. And I would like to share with everyone a, shall we say, rumored pitch that may have occurred at the beginning stages of planning for this sequel trilogy. Now, I know that there was not a roadmap laid out in the way that you or I would lay out a strategy, let's say, for the sequel trilogy. Okay,
I don't think they had a roadmap or a strategy. That was kind of the problem.
That's exactly right. So, well, let's think about it this way: if you were going to achieve almost any goal in this world, you would have a starting point, a middle point, and an end point. So, how you could be so incompetent as to not do that with a major franchise that has the capacity to make you billions of dollars, I don't understand. I really don't. Have you given that any thought about how that's even possible?
Oh, I have. Believe me, I've discussed it a number of times. And that's one of the things that, from a financial perspective and a business perspective, that I look back on, with what I've done in the videos that we've done on that. That's more or less the angle I've always taken, right? A lot of other channels out there have talked about the Star Wars sequel trilogies, as a collective or as individual films being disasters from a storytelling standpoint, from a fan standpoint, from a Star Wars standpoint. Now, those are distinctions that, whether people liked or didn't like, as you brought up earlier, the prequel trilogies. One of the criticisms that was never leveled to at least to my ears that I had ever seen or heard, I don't think anybody ever accused them of being disrespectful to Star Wars. They were never disrespectful to the original films.
They were not kill the past.
Right. They didn't kill the past. They were not disrespectful to the Skywalker legacy.
And then immediately unkill the past?
Right, exactly. So that's just it. So we can say that from a technical aspect, from certain writing aspects, were there things in those movies that could have been better? Yes. However, they were still far more legitimate Star Wars stories and films. And the characters were far more legitimate Star Wars characters than anything that we've gotten from Disney, arguably. Well, I mean, anything certainly in the sequel trilogies, no doubt. And again, as you said, how could Disney get to that point where it's like, well, we didn't have a plan? My understanding is the extent of the plan, and this is according to, and Pro, you probably know this book better than I do, Robert Iger's own autobiography, where he talked about, I think in some detail, where, when the purchase went down, when they bought Lucasfilm, one of the things that he went back, and I think he talked about in the book, was that Lucas himself was a little upset that his treatments for the sequel trilogies were not used. But Iger at the same time had a vision, basically just telling Kennedy and Lucasfilm and J.J. Abrams at the time, hey, look, remake A New Hope. That worked, right? That sold. That was the biggest movie of all time, inflation adjusted, or one of the top 2 or 3 at this point. I can't think off the top of my head if anything surpassed it with the movie ticket prices inflation that we've had in the last 2 years, especially. But point being is that it was a matter of remake that, because that's the simple thing, right? This is when Hollywood started making the biggest part, in my opinion, of their turn away from artistic beauty that we had. And, I just did a show recently. I do a show with Tom Connors from Midnight's Edge, and we do a show called 4K for You. Well, we just did a celebration show of the 50th anniversary of The Godfather, because we both just got the big collector box sets on 4K Blu-ray. We're talking about classic films. We talked about how when films used to be made like this, the stories were beautiful, the writing was beautiful, the cinematography was all beautiful. The 80s was such a golden era of storytelling, a breakthrough era for Hollywood, even into the 90s. And then something happened a couple of decades later on the way to the Forum. Things went to pot, and Hollywood just started basically making recanned garbage, right? Let's just take what worked 20, 30 years ago, repackage it, and that's basically what happened with Force Awakens. Remake A New Hope. And then my understanding is Kathleen Kennedy's idea was, but this time, let's make it a girl, not to misgender Rey Palpatine in any way.
That would not be allowed in a Disney park, by the way.
Yeah, I know.
Rey is for potential birthing persons. Remember.
People and peoples and Jedi of all gender multi-persuasions.
Jedi dreamers of all ages.
Please raise your lightsabers in a gender non-specific sexual manner. And
all right, well, you've went and done it. We're going to have to get into this now.
I have to. Go ahead.
Here I was just going to talk about merchandising, and you've done it, Valiant.
Oh.
Do you remember the... Did you ever watch The Office much?
Oh yeah, I've watched the Ricky Gervais BBC series, and I've watched the U.S. But my wife loves the show. I mean, we both love it. It's one of those fodder shows. You turn on at night and you just watch it over and over again.
So Star Wars, to me, is a lot like the episode where Michael Scott talks about his vasectomies. You remember that?
Yes.
Snip, unsnip, snip, unsnip, snip, unsnip. Do you know what that does to a man? That is what Star Wars has done to its fans. You have been snipped and unsnipped and snipped again.
I believe we have just created a very popular Twitter meme with that. You should get some of your staff on that.
Can I just say that I dread every one of those memes. I can't imagine how off-putting vasectomy Star Wars memes are going to be, but there you have it. Stick with Michael Scott.
It's going to be performing the lightsaber by Maz Kanata.
Please, I beg of you, stick with the Michael Scott meme and just put words over it. Do not go to diagrams. We don't need it. All right, so, so let's go. Let's go into exactly what happened as best as I know it, and then we'll go back to the merchandising.
Mm-hmm.
J.J. Abrams is brought in. They need something that is going to be successful no matter what. A New Hope was successful. Let's redo it. We'll come back to why they chose Rey when we talk about the merchandising. Okay. A New Hope, in my opinion, makes some key mistakes, but overall, it's a good movie. Now, does it depend on the member berries? Oh, it definitely depends on those delicious member berries. However, it's not bad, despite the fact that it turns Han Solo's character into a deadbeat father who runs away. Okay, so it destroys his character arc, and I know we got to kill him, but the way he's killed is just, it doesn't achieve much. So
he didn't want to be involved in those films, but
Right.
I mean, you're right. The way they got rid of him, because
He
I
still
remember having conversations with friends walking into that movie. We're all like, Ford is one and done in this. He's gonna die. I mean, we went in at least knowing with that. Now, like you said, the way that it happened was disappointing, but
Well, it was bad enough they had to bring him back from the dead, right? That's how bad it was.
Yeah.
Okay. But how do you go from The Force Awakens to The Last Jedi? People just wanted that. And so they talk about Rian Johnson as if he had complete creative control over it. But he did not. Here's what really was happening. At the time, Lucasfilm had formed an all-female story group, which was headed by a lady named Kiri Hart.
Yep.
And by the way, ladies and gentlemen, we haven't, we're completely on a different tangent than I had expected. So we're just free flowing, okay? So for you nerds out there right now who are checking every single thing, we're going to be right. Okay, so Kiri Hart
That's what we're here for.
is in charge of an all-female Lucasfilm story group. They begin meeting at their homes, and they are working on The Last Jedi and where this is going to go before The Force Awakens is released. Mm-hmm. Rian Johnson is being involved in that, and he is also writing the film, but he is being assisted significantly by Kiri Hart. Now, they have an agenda with that film that is separate from the agenda that J.J. Abrams brings, and that's why they determined to jettison The Force Awakens when they go to The Last Jedi. Mm-hmm. So it's important to understand that it was not just Rian Johnson. It's also so bad that the request for Luke Skywalker to be preserved until the final film is rejected, and they have to bring J.J. Abrams back for the third film because they've run off their director, who's sitting over there saying, guys, I can't make the last Star Wars movie in the Skywalker trilogies, right? The Skywalker saga. I can't end that without Luke. And in fact...
And where they've already killed what was supposed to be the main villain. And of course, we're talking about, for folks out there, that's Mr. Colin Trevorrow.
Right. So Trevorrow is sitting there saying, I'm sorry, I should have said his name. Trevorrow is sitting there saying, guys, what is going on? What are you thinking? And he is shut down by Kennedy. No, you're going to use this. You're going to have this. And he's like, well, I don't have a villain. I don't have the legacy hero. You've killed everyone. Okay. Now think about this too. I saw a graphic the other day that I thought was really, really good. It had a picture of it had a picture of all the original Star Wars characters, and it had sort of these categories placed over their heads. So like Leia was the brains of the operation. Han is the ace pilot. Chewie is the brute force warrior. And it's got the labels over all of them, right? Then it showed the sequel trilogy. And I love this because what it did was it's got all the characters from the sequel trilogy. And like every single thing that was good from the original trilogy is sitting over Rey's head. And over the other characters, there's words like comic relief, filler guy. And it completely answers the problem with the sequel trilogy, which is that if you empower your character, your main character, to the point that you don't need any other characters at all, they're pointless. Mm-hmm. Then what was the point in the first place? But that's what we get because, and circling back, here we go back to merchandising, because in the beginning, the pitch was for, the pitch from Kathleen Kennedy to Bob Iger. Again, take this with a dose of salt, please, ladies and gentlemen. Use your sodium. But the pitch was that if they had this sequel trilogy be based around a female character, and if that female character was incredible, then they would be able to sell merchandise equally to little girls and little boys. Because what they were looking at, you see, here's the thing. The thing is that from the fan perspective, we often look at it and we think about, why did they do this? And why did they take this out on my favorite character? And why did they not, yada, 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 okay? But from the business side of it, which is the point of this channel, the business side of it, they had a hypothesis. The hypothesis is not supported by any psychologist out there, but it nonetheless was a hypothesis. And what they thought was that if Star Wars was centered around an ultra-powerful female, that little girls would buy it up at the same level little boys. And they're looking over the past decades, and they're saying, okay, Star Wars toys, look at how well they sell. What if we could double that?
Mm-hmm.
We'll be raking in money. We'll be doing the Scrooge McDuck thing, right? And so they're looking at that saying, let's make it about girls. So she does that, thinking that little boys will love the spaceships and everything, but also little girls will, because here's Rey. The problem is Luke Skywalker. And that's built into the very first proposal for the sequel trilogy. The problem is Luke. Luke's why we can't sell to little girls. Luke's why girls don't care about Star Wars.
Which, of course, is nonsense out there, because I probably got, when it comes to YouTube, I probably have way more friends on YouTube that are Star Wars fans who are girls than guys. And I mean, it's changed so much over the years, and that's always baffled me. And again, from a business perspective, you know, talk about Marvel, talk about Star Wars. These were two properties that Disney bought ostensibly to rake in the boys. Right? They had the Disney, we can't say princesses. If y'all saw the last video, we can't say that. They
potentially birthing royalties.
Yes, they had the non-gender specific royal people that attracted young
friends.
Young people that typically have two X chromosomes and may wear dresses matching those of the gender non-specific royal peoples in Disney World. They had that market locked up. What they didn't have was the other side, and they bought Marvel and Star Wars to appeal to them. Now, Marvel had a great run of 10 years before they went cuckoo and decided, well, we don't want to do that anymore. Let's go elsewhere. Let's abandon the audience that we've appealed to, and let's go over here. Star Wars, they brought in Lucasfilm, and they said, $4 billion? Piss on that audience. Let's just go over here right away and dump them.
Well,
the temerity, you know.
So you got to think about, they still had a shot after The Force Awakens because it is a fantastic success.
Mm-hmm. $2 billion global box.
People were seeing issues, right? People after a little while started saying, okay, well, this Rey is really powerful. Like, she's doing things that Luke, you know, did not do until the end. How is she doing this? And then people were making these theories. They're like, oh, she's a Kenobi. Oh, she's a Palpatine. You know, and all these different ideas about how she's doing this. And there must be reasons. And oh, I know exactly. You know, they're theorizing, and all that just gets, you know, thrown in the dumpster in Last Jedi.
That was the problem. I mean, that was what I heard. That there was a plan that J.J. Abrams had. There were scenes in The Force Awakens, especially everybody brings up the scene where Rey and Finn are in the Falcon, and Finn's, how did you know how to do that? And she says, I don't know. Apparently, Abrams had a plan for that that was jettisoned.
Han even says, you'll find out, basically in the movie. You'll find out later.
They set it all up, and it's like, and in came Kiri Hart, as you said, and Rian Johnson in the story group, and saying,
how did you get that lightsaber? That's a story for another day, but not really.
Yeah, but no, we'll never get there.
We'll put it out in a graphic novel that we only release in Turkeyistan.
Oh, God. All right.
You got it. So, all right. So, and then, I mean, we really don't need to get into the Rise of Skywalker and how bad that movie is. I mean, it's just, anyway. So, yeah. But the original The original theory is that if they center it around an all-powerful female, they can drive sales to both sexes, both sets of children, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now that fails. Can you pull up the articles that we had talked about before? And I want people to understand, I could not find a public place that reveals the pitch that I'm talking about. That's why I say it comes with a dose of sodium.
Mm-hmm.
It's firmly in the rumor category. However, we do have articles that were in the mainstream press around this time that are pushing the toys and the narrative around the toys, that little girls will love Star Wars toys just as much as boys love Star Wars toys. And I think that the audience can see these articles and get the idea that what we're talking about was part or was the main part of the strategy and where they were going. Mm-hmm. I don't know. How do you want to do this? Do you want to read a segment of this article?
We can. And look, The Force Awakens, I think they had a lot of good toy sales because it was the first big Star Wars thing in 20 years, roughly, or 15 years at that point. And, you know, BB-8 was relatively popular as a little droid for kids. I mean, I think I got my kid a little BB-8 droid. You know, the dogs chase it around the floor. It was, you know.
Oh, it was a cute toy, well designed.
Right. And again, I think we all know kind of where this winds up because we've seen so many people posting about these Star Wars toys that came later in the years. But yeah, here we go. You know, these days, you literally can't turn your head in a big name store without spying a cool T-shirt with the Millennium Falcon on it. Classic Star Wars. But for many parents or figure First Order stormtroopers, which look like classic stormtroopers, but for many parents and collectors, the influx of The Force Awakens brings toys with it, a very familiar concern that because Star Wars has traditionally been marketed as a franchise for young boys, it will end up inadvertently excluding girls. Now, I got a lot of friends at my age, of course, that have kids like me. We grew up Star Wars fans. I don't know anybody that was complaining about this. I don't know a soul that I've never heard anybody say this. I've never heard anybody complain, oh, well, they came out with these new Star Wars movies. But you know what? I just feel bad for my my children that may or may not non-specifically have two X chromosomes, that they feel left out. Never heard that in my life, but according to this article from MTV, here we go.
Well, now, let me ask you this. So that the audience knows, and so that those who are listening to this rather than watching it can know, when was this article put out?
That's what I was highlighting before. This is from December 16th, 2015. This is leading up right to the release of Force Awakens. And
now we could go and find many articles that are of very similar narrative, let's say, that are promoting the exact same idea. In fact, I sent you two articles that are promoting this exact same idea about little girls have been excluded from Star Wars toys. Mm-hmm. Okay? Why do you think that suddenly writers for major news outlets had the exact same epiphany at the exact same time that little girls had not been catered to by Star Wars, and now they were, and it was a good thing, and that toy manufacturers, advertisers, distributors, and retailers were ecstatic? Why would all of these writers for all of these major publications suddenly have that same epiphany?
I wonder, Pro, if that has something to do with an age-old public relations tactic that used to go across way back in the day, especially in the late 80s and 90s, by fax machines to every news organization when political parties, let's say, wanted to push certain talking points. And then you would turn on your television that morning or that evening, and all the major networks would almost verbatim be reciting the same exact copy.
So you're saying to me, me and my naive, ignorant little self, I just think the world happens sort of randomly and I just float along inside of it. You're telling me that people in different publications sometimes write about the exact same thing on the exact same day, and that it's not just completely natural?
Actually, Pro, I would go one step further. I would say that many publications produce the exact same copy that they aren't even themselves writing.
My mind is exploding, as if the Force has suddenly entered into my prefrontal cortex, as if 1,000 voices have suddenly been silenced. So what we're looking at is USA Today following the exact same pattern.
Mm-hmm.
This was the narrative that was being pushed at that time, so that it would enter into the public consciousness that, oh, these toys are for girls. These toys are for girls. These toys are for girls. We should get them for Christmas. We should get them for Christmas.
PR astroturfing.
I'm a bad person if I don't get a girl's toy from Star Wars for my niece. I'm a bad person. I should do this. And the problem is that it didn't work out. The problem is that if we go now into any toy retailer, or, well, most of them are now gone. So let's say that we go into Walmart or Le Target or wherever you would like to go. And how many Star Wars toys? What area do you think they're taking up right now in those aisles?
Well, Pro, it's funny you mentioned that. I haven't seen anything designated as Star Wars in a store of that nature in years. I have seen sections of the toy aisle that say The Mandalorian.
Yes. The child is doing quite well. But as far as the sequel trilogy, we might say that this strategy not only failed to increase Star Wars merchandise, but that it diminished Star Wars merchandise. You might go so far as to say that. Now, if the sequel trilogy saw diminishing returns on merchandise, might that also correlate to a diminished interest in said sequel trilogy that therefore goes beyond the talking points that we sometimes hear or the arguments that we sometimes hear that, oh, people loved the sequel trilogy. It's a vocal minority. Oh, wait a minute. The all Star Wars films go down in interest as the trilogy plays out. It's not the fault of the later films. It's just that you had this burst of nostalgia in the beginning. Well, do merchandise sales not correlate to interest? And if they do, does that not indicate waning interest over time?
Quite. And I mean, and look, and let's not forget that merchandise sales, quite frankly, was the crowning jewel for George Lucas when it came to the original Star. It wasn't the films. And that was one of the things. He was wise enough when he got the deal with Fox is that Lucas retained those merchandising rights, and that made him billions upon billions upon billions over the next decade or two.
So
and in this own article, it even says, right here's why I highlighted it, Star Wars does it very well that every character has their nuances and their differences, says Daisy Ridley. Quote, girls can look at this wonderful array of women and see something in everything, and also men. Also
men. They're in there somewhere.
They're in there. The audience is not gender specific. However, the next line of the article, still the audience that went to TFA in its first weekend skewed heavily male, 66%. Oh, shit.
And that was no doubt put into the USA Today as a ding against Star Wars. Don't think that they're proving Daisy Ridley wrong.
That was a CYA. Yeah.
Star Wars is still misogynistic. Don't. Okay, so here's the question, right? We've got two articles about toy sales and how they're going to do fantastic. Mm-hmm. Are they correct? No, they're not. This did not pay off. Are these two writers probably off peddling something else that corporations have told them to peddle now? Yeah, probably so. Now, the interesting thing is that just like the merchandising gamble did not pay off, there was another thing that Kathleen Kennedy pitched around the same time to Robert Iger, then the CEO and chair of the board. She pitched to him that failed to succeed and would result in his disapproval largely of Kathleen Kennedy. And the pitch was, they had the plans. We're going to go deep now into the Disney parks and how Galaxy's Edge came about. And the Galactic Starcruiser, by the way, which is just launched not too long ago. But so there was a plan at Walt Disney Imagineering, and there are articles on this, so this isn't into the rumor mill. But they had a plan for a Star Wars Land expansion that was going to cover all of the trilogies. Excuse me, cover all of the trilogies, and so it would be something that people of all generations could enjoy. Kathleen Kennedy looked at that with the same disregard she looked at the source material for Star Wars when she was coming up with the sequel trilogy, and she said, let's get rid of that. And the pitch to Iger was this. She said directly to Iger that the original Star Wars films are few. We are going to make decades and decades of new Star Wars films. Why would we not focus on the new films that we're going to make? Now, this is exactly in line with how they handled the sequel trilogy. Why would you care about the original characters? Let's just kill them, right? Because we're going to make tons and tons of movies off of Rey. We're going to make tons and tons off of toys from Rey.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what they do with the parks is then Imagineering comes in one day and finds out, oh, all of these plans that we've had, they're gone. Every last one of them is gone. The original spot that they were going to put that expansion was somewhere around the Indiana Jones Stunt Spectacular at Hollywood Studios. Same location for Disneyland, by the way. The Disneyland location didn't change. But what happened was they had this massive budget now. Okay, so the budget gets expanded. They have to then rework everything to go into the new sequel timeline, and they're going to put it after The Last Jedi. Now, here's something most people don't know. I'm going to speculate here officially for everybody, okay? Quote, speculate, unquote.
Go for it.
Yep. What I think happens, is that they wanted this new expansion to reflect the vision they had for Star Wars. And so what they did was they subjugated WDI, Walt Disney Imagineering, under the control of the Lucasfilm Story Group, which at the time was sort of this all-female crew, again, driven by Kerry Hart, also now working with Rian Johnson. And they come in having almost no theme park, well, let's just say it, no theme park experience whatsoever, no theme park design experience. They're going to come in and work with Imagineering to produce this expansion. Now, at Disneyland, you pretty much get what they had intended to give you, minus you lose one ride that I'm not sure would have been that great. It's a slow-moving track ride. I'm not sure it would have mattered. And you lose a main restaurant. However, what happens is that they had, between the point at Imagineering, when they had scrapped those plans that they were told, okay, you got to get rid of them, there was this short period of time where they had the ability to sort of blue sky it and just go crazy. Those plans were incredible, and they're going to be semi-incorporated into Hollywood Studios. But they are forced to then take what's going to go into Disneyland and retrofit that into Hollywood Studios in Orlando, because they don't want to spend the money to design two different lands. Now, what that means is that at Hollywood Studios, they have to bulldoze part of their park. Now, again, this is coming from two different forces. One force is that they've got the Lucasfilm Story Group, driven by all women, which, women are great, right? But there's something weird when you have a story group that's comprised only of one sex or gender or belief system or whatever you want to do, right? If there's one of anything, you kind of think, well, that's not very balanced. But it's driven by all women who have no theme park experience, and it is put specifically in this one time frame. And now, not only is it being constrained by that, but it's also being constrained by the fact that it has to match almost exactly with a different territory in Disneyland. So it's a different footprint that this has got to fit. So the only way they can do that is to bulldoze an area of the park. The original goal, beyond just putting Star Wars into Hollywood studios, the original goal for having this expansion in the first place is to increase the capacity at this park. Well, now they don't increase the capacity. So not only are they now locked into what we will later find out is a divisive period inside this Star Wars timeline that many fans don't like, but now they're also sort of pushing the circle peg into the square hole in Hollywood studios. So for those of you who are looking at the Galactic Starcruiser now, the hotel experience, and saying, well, why is that not attached to the theme park? Well, the reason that it's not attached to the theme park is because originally it was supposed to be. But then they had to modify it, and now it's off by itself, and now you're getting into a box truck to be driven over for your experience. So you've got Kathleen Kennedy making a proposition to Iger that this is going to be very successful because we're going to go with our new timeline. The problem is that Iger believes that. He also believes the thing about the merchandise. The merchandise starts proving that that's not true early. But Iger comes out and makes a public statement that he's going to be embarrassed about, because he comes out and says that they don't even have to advertise the stuff for the parks because Star Wars fans are just going to come flooding the parks. They spend a ton of money widening the pathways at Disneyland in preparation. I think it was called Project Stardust. Am I right on that? I think I am. Project Stardust.
You'd know better than I would. I don't remember.
And so they widen the pathways. The problem is attendance drops. Attendance drops at Disneyland when they open a new Star Wars expansion. That is unheard of. The idea that you would have an expansion and less people would come. Like, you're talking about, you open just any ride at Disney and you've got 4-hour waits. They opened Ratatouille at Epcot and they were having insane waits, and it's not even that great of a ride. You open Star Wars in Disneyland and you have less people. They made up excuse after excuse, but behind the scenes, what that did was it embarrassed Iger on two fronts. Front number one, he's embarrassed because he bought into this merchandising thing and it's blowing up on him. Mm-hmm. Point number two, he buys into this idea that we're going to lock the Star Wars lands into our timeline with our new characters, and we're going to get rid of the old characters. And it fails miserably. That's why Robert Iger, though he is ideologically aligned with Kathleen Kennedy, is no fan of Kathleen Kennedy.
Definitely an interesting history. And I know it's probably a number of parts of that. There's a lot of folks out there that have probably heard bits and pieces of that, but I have a feeling there's a lot of people that have never heard it all put together like that. And I especially don't think anybody has heard you tell that story, because frankly, you were one of the folks that for the last several years were breaking this information to the public at large.
And you can find that information over at thatparkplace.com.
Yes,
that's your home for all the news that should be fun.
And of course, links will be in this video as always. Definitely, if you guys and girls out there are not reading thatparkplace.com, you should be. It should be on your daily clicks when you go check the news, because there is so much good stuff that you guys put out.
Well, now, Valiant, let me tell you, I'm going to give you a scavenger hunt for the next time you go down to Disney World, because I know you're just dying to get down there and be called friend over and over.
I will be near Disney World. It's called Universal. I doubt I will set foot in Disney World, but I do plan.
You're telling me you're going to have a Dole Whip FedExed to your location at Universal?
I don't know what that is.
It's basically a pineapple ice cream float.
Oh, okay.
People go crazy about it.
I've now that you say that, okay, I think I have seen or heard of those things. But,
so here's your scavenger hunt. Should you be given a free ticket to Hollywood Studios at Disney? I'm going to share with everybody this, but no, not really, just you, okay? So if you doubt that Disney at one point had a much larger plan that they wanted to do with their expansion, there is something that you can go find that will show you a remnant, a vestigial symbol, let's say, of what once could have been at Hollywood Studios. And anybody can find this. Originally, again, take this with salt, ladies and gentlemen, but originally, the Star Wars expansion was supposed to go in what became the cast parking lot. Again, take your salt on this, but there would have been a parking garage for cast that would have blocked view of it from the main parking lot for guests. You would have entered that area through three potential locations, but one of those locations, one of those outlets into the land, is behind the Muppet area. Okay, so there is Muppet Vision 3D with Kermit the Frog, and it's a great little show. But you go behind there, Mama Melrose's is back there, Pizza Rizzo. But if you go back behind the theater to the point where guests exit that theater, if you've been to Hollywood studios many times, maybe you've got this place already found out in your head. Go there. Behind there, you're going to find Star Wars themed walls for absolutely no reason whatsoever. The Star Wars themed walls are there because originally that was going to be an entry point into a land at a location that never came to fruition. But they still needed a wall, so they just kept it. They didn't retheme it to be Muppets. And so if you doubt that that location was the original spot, go back there and think to yourself, why? Why is there a Star Wars wall here? So there you go.
And that's what happened when they consolidated plans to shrink that park to match what they had in Anaheim to save costs.
Had to clone it.
Right. Yeah. It's amazing to watch what has happened to this. And all that being said, and maybe we can close with this, unless you have anything else specifically that you wanted to bring up.
We shall save the Galactic Starcruiser and what it could have been and what I know about it for another day.
I will do that in a separate. Well, that's probably another 20, 30-minute conversation, I'm sure.
Yeah, I think we're gassed at this point. What have we done so far? Altogether at this point, and I don't know where this is going to line up in the conversation and what people see, but we've done something like 5 hours of conversation at this point.
Just about. And I know. And I know this is something that people talk about, constantly. And that is, now that we've kind of walked back through some of this torrid history of where Disney burned the house down, or at least, to be fair, as much as I don't like Robert Iger, was stupid enough to listen to Kathleen Kennedy and do what she said to do.
So let me ask you this, and then we'll close. Okay, let's say that Star Wars, after The Force Awakens, doesn't go down in popularity, but rather it grows. Okay, and let's say that was a potential reality. People will sometimes say, "Oh no, it had to da-da-da-da-da." Okay, but it didn't. So if it had grown in popularity, how much money did Disney leave on the table by misfiring, in your opinion?
In gross revenues?
In gross revenues, merchandise and box office.
Good God.
These are big numbers.
I'm going to say probably somewhere on the order of 5 to 10 billion.
Exactly. I agree with you. And then you play that out over decades, right?
Yeah. I'm just talking about from 2015 to where we're sitting now. 5 to 10 billion easy. Gross revenues. And that's why I say I've been looking at the numbers for a while, and I'm like, I cannot put pen to paper and tell you that the Star Wars brand, with a $4 billion purchase price from George Lucas, with another, I'd have to go back and look it up. I put the numbers together, but somewhere in the order of around $2.5 billion for the films, the production and the marketing of those 5 films, or $2 billion maybe it was. I think when I put all the films together and wound the numbers down with what we knew from production, global prints and advertising, plus Disney's take on the box office revenue, not the grosses. People get that wrong all the time. If Force Awakens made $2 billion, the theaters get to keep some of that, folks. But if you took all the movies together, I think Disney might have profited somewhere around $500 million or so, maybe $750 million, maybe as high as $1 billion between all 5 of those films. And that was mostly from The Force Awakens. I don't even know if they broke even on Rise of Palpatine because of all the reshoots that they did. They probably might have made a little bit of money at the box office on The Last Jedi. They definitely made money on TFA. I think they made money on Rogue One. They lost their ass on Solo, and that was a big problem.
Solo was the canary in the coal mine.
Good Lord. Well, I mean, people punished Solo for what Disney did to them with The Last Jedi.
Solo was the wake up, and then the 1-2 punch was Galaxy's Edge launching afterwards, and the park attendance actually going down.
Right. I mean, it was a disaster of epic proportions. And from a business perspective, I always looked at it and I said, if I'm sitting in the top seat, there's no way I let this continue. How the hell do you let Star Wars fail? You let the most popular, most valuable franchise in the history of anything ever, merchandising and film, die like this? And how do you screw it up this badly? Then, of course,
that is how you arrive at the point where Bob Chapek makes the worst decision of his early tenure as CEO, where he rehires Kathleen Kennedy, in part out of fear of what will happen should she be removed, what will happen in a toxic Lucasfilm, and who in the world would want to take that over. And then, as a result of that, what we've been seeing in the news is in large part because when he did not get rid of her, that said to everybody else, he's not going to get rid of us.
And that's why we started this conversation a couple of videos ago where we did. Because you have to understand what we're seeing now. The veil has come off of some of the rot that's in Disney. I mean, everybody talks about it, tacitly in videos on YouTube, saying that, oh, well, Disney's woke and this and that. And I know. We all know the elements are there. But until the last few weeks, we had never seen the veil pulled back to see what has really, my words, infected that company. And it's radical ideologies that want to basically hijack a company like that and use it for their own personal issues to push into society, when Disney should just make cartoons, just make entertainment. We shouldn't be, diving into one thing or another. We should just make good movies. And this is part of the reason, in my opinion, after seeing all this in the last few weeks, when you talk about, how could Chapek do this, or how could have Iger supported this when he was still chairman at the time, to be fair. And I always wondered, I'm sure he had an influential hand in that decision. There's been rumors out there that her contract has some type of automatic renewal clause that, short of her burning the building to the ground, as it were, that basically getting rid of her is a difficult thing. And it's the only explanation I've been able to come up with. Again, and I know there's a lot of Star Wars fan channels out there, and I try to, again, differentiate this. I'm purely looking at this from a business financial perspective. I don't care who the company is. I don't care how quote-unquote woke or whatever. There has to be more of an excuse than that, because we're talking about billions of dollars of lost revenues that never materialize, that financial analysts expected to be there. And yet, she still has a job. And maybe she's going to be there until Indiana Jones comes out, which may well be the case. And I think that's been such a disaster that it's had to have been delayed and whatnot. So, yes, we might be sitting around with her in charge, tacitly at least, to use that word again, because the lady is 70-something years old. I mean, I don't think she's going to be sitting around there till she's 85 or 90.
At this point, I've become resigned to the fact that she will be there until the end of time.
And you may be right. You may be right. But I mean, it does seem, from what we know, and which I can completely understand. Again, where she is in life, as far as the day-to-day operations of Lucasfilm, let's be honest, she's not really involved.
She is much happier when she is fluttering onto the set of Indiana Jones. That's where I think she's happiest.
Yep, her and Frank, that's where they are. But that film or that movie has now wrapped, I believe, finally after 6 or 7 months.
So one quick anecdote about that movie, and then we'll drop it because we do have to wrap at some point. But and folks, if you're enjoying this conversation, I mean, part of the fun of it is that we can just keep going because we're enjoying the conversation. So we hope you are too. But
this is true.
One of the funny things about that movie is the rule for that movie was don't hurt Harrison. Don't hurt him. Okay? He's getting up in years.
You had one job.
Don't hurt him. You know what they did? They hurt Harrison. And do you know how they did it? I want you to think about this. This is the level of stupid that you have to be involved in. Like, you've got to be wading in a pool of stupidity to pull this off. They had Harrison Ford taking punches in a stunt on a moving train. Literally, a moving train. He's 79. Get the actor, get the stunt double. One job. Don't hurt him. Yep. You broke his shoulder.
And for the record, Pro, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, that you were the first person to actually break the news that Harrison Ford's injury was much more severe than was being led on. And, if I'm not mistaken, you even put the time frame out of about 12 weeks, which is almost exactly how long Harrison Ford actually was out in the end.
I beat Grace Randolph to that scoop by about 5 minutes, and I don't think she'll ever forgive me.
Well, Pro, once again, thank you so much for taking your valuable time and doing this. Look, I know people are going to enjoy the heck out of these last two pieces that we've done, and I think this is something that folks have really been wanting to hear. You know, I think from you for a long time. So I hope hope everybody has really enjoyed this, and if you have, please make sure that you do share this out. Hit the like button, the subscribe button. That all helps. That helps us to be able to do more of these things because we got to get the word out, and YouTube isn't always as friendly as we'd like it. So we need your help and the audience to make that happen. And in addition to doing that, make sure you're checking out thatparkplace.com each and every day for new stories that Pro and his amazing staff have coming out. They do some great writing, great scoops. And like you said, it's just all the news that should be fun.
And remember, folks, Kathleen Kennedy has not hit the subscribe button for Valiant Renegade. Don't be like Kathleen Kennedy.
Oh, God.
Subscribe today.
I think we'll close on that one. Thank you so much, folks. And until next time, take care.